if you guys have any questions, just interrupt. I mean, there's so much to go through. I'm just going to kind of hit the high points of how I run my program, and you're going to get to see it from two different ways. You're going to get to see it from ag teacher perspective, but now I also have had my brother-in-law, who is more or less my kid. He lived with me, and now my own kids are in the program and showing, and how I manage those situations with those families and those parents, especially in a competitive setting. I preach show team, that we're a family or a team, and for the most part, I really haven't ever had anybody buck me on that. Kind of just picked this up from whenever I was out at Balco, and it was more of a cattle community, and when I went to Colgate, they showed can eaters. I mean, it was bad when I showed up, and it was to the point of we would just have a clipping night, and I might clip 7-8 does a night, and you just learn how to clip really quickly and try to be as efficient as possible. And if you mess up, you learn, hey, I'm not going to do that same mistake on this next one. So whenever we get to talk about clipping a little bit, we'll talk more about that. I communicate with a lot of my people just in text messages. I mean, I know there's Remind app. Use whatever you're comfortable with. I like them being able to respond back and forth, and without using a Remind app or any of that, it just kind of simplifies my life just using text message. All my people have my cell phone number. I know there are some that don't do that. I feel like that would be probably more difficult if you did not have that out there for them to use. When I say haul together, I don't mean that I go by and pick up everybody's stuff. I have some families that haul themselves, but we still all say, hey, we're going to leave about this time, whatever. If I'm going to be, which most of the time I'm the first one there of our group, and I'll say, hey, how many stands you bringing, how many you bringing, and I'll save space to put up stands for our goat projects, and we also have our sheep side starting to grow too, so I just treat them as the same, and we just go together. Try to make it an us versus them. Like in this picture here, this is the year of whenever COVID happened, so like 2 days after that or a day after that's when everything got canceled. And that year we had 3 of the 4 division winners there at OIE. I'm not going to take credit for all that because, I mean, that one girl was a Piper girl, and but the other boy, I mean, that was just show team and everybody working together and getting it figured out, and just had a really good lucky day for all of us there. Also, whenever I'm talking about us versus them, I try to plan out where I'm going to try to get different size goats, different age goats, things like that, so we're not always in the same classes. So, a lot of times you're not going to be able to help that, especially in the goat world. We don't have breeds. You're going to just show them by weight. But if you can buy different age, especially does, that's going to help you out a lot on trying to split them kids up and allowing them other families to have success too.
What's your take on like jackpot shows versus OIE and like Tulsa and all that? Because there are some ag teachers that will just take them to the bigger shows, and then there's some that will, hey, we'll go every weekend.
My family and our crew will hit about 25, 30 shows a year. Yep. Jackpots to the junior, or not junior nationals, some nationals like the New Year's national stuff. We might go to Kansas City this year. So, I mean, I go to everything. I know some guys don't do that or girls don't do that. It's your choice. You got to find that where you can have that home life. And I understand that. For my family, this is our home. This is what we do. We go to Hawaii and stay for 10 days, but we're showing sheep and goats pretty much that entire time. And that's our vacation. So you need to find what your priority is and how you feel like you can be the most help to your people. I would highly suggest at least going to a jackpot or two, because that's where you're going to learn and meet your families, if that makes sense. And it's not as high stressful situations as a county show, OIE, Tulsa, high stress. A lot different atmosphere, or at least for us, it's a lot different atmosphere.
What's your opinion on does versus weathers, jackpot wise, that kind of thing?
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that here in a second too. So how to start off newbies, and most of them kids in that picture have graduated the last year or two, except for my boy. And actually, I've gained I think 3 or 4 new families already, and we haven't got into school yet. And almost all these families I've had to start out the conversation with, okay, what's your goal? And being a new family, most of them say, what do you mean? And I'll say, well, I'll tell you what my goal is for brand new rookie families, make South the county. If you don't make South the county, you can't hardly justify doing these projects. So for me, make it sell to the county, kind of lets them know, okay, this is the bar. I don't say win a jackpot. I don't say win a class at OIE. To me, I think that's probably a fairly reasonable task for anybody's county. What's the budget? Does anybody know what just a market goat is going for right now at the sale barn?
What size?
Let's just say 70, 80 pound goat.
$300-$400.
Yeah. So that's market. That's for a can eater goat that'll jump on your car, just a goat. So when you go to these breeders' houses, back whenever I first started out and lastly was out at Alva, I remember you could buy goats for $300-$400. I mean, an average goat, and be okay. You can't even hardly even get the sick one off the farm for that. We'll talk more about this here in a second. So with budgets, I tell them families starting out $500 to $1,000, and that's very, very minimum low end. You're gonna pretty quickly hear the response back from that parent of, oh my God, or they're gonna say, okay. And then you can kind of conversate and say, well, I want you to know that the budgets can go upwards to whatever you want it to be, 10, 20, 30,000, crazy numbers. And so if you worked hard enough or you flipped enough rocks over at enough breeders' houses, you could find something that'll fit a kid for that $500 if you'll just wait long enough. Don't wait until, like right now, we're 10 days away from Tulsa nomination. Might be tough. So you need to have them families communicating with you. Make that plan of how much the budget is. Give yourself time. Because I promise you, if you will go back to a breeder's house 2 or 3 times and you see them goats grow and change, one, that breeder's going to appreciate that you're coming out. 2, they're going to kind of learn about you, learn about your program, and then you're going to learn about them. And if you become a repeat customer, you're going to be able to find them kind of buys, especially if you're shopping at ag teachers' houses. They always seem to have that goat or something that they're tired of feeding, and you can buy from them a little cheaper. We'll talk about penning and barns. For me, I prefer about an 4 by whatever pen, so 4 foot wide, that's in front of my gate. And if you got the 20 foot long 4x4 paneling, awesome. I would not use the cattle panels because you're going to be unhanging or getting goats' heads unhung out of the fence, especially does, all the time. So on penning, that's what I would do. I have my own personal animals in just a big lean-to barn. It's not insulated, but it's fully covered. They're never out in the sun unless I have feed costs. That's something else I would hit your parents up about and let them know up front. It's a heck of a lot cheaper than feeding a pig, that's for sure. You don't have to buy shavings. That's another big plus. I would highly suggest putting down the crushed rock or what do they call it? Screenings. And again, we'll talk more about that here in a minute. Building relationships with breeders is huge. There are 3 or 4 people that I always go to every year. And there are some years it just don't click up. And that's just part of it. But sometimes you can find goats in them places that'll work, especially for maybe your lower end budget. And if you had that higher end budget and you can afford their better ones, buy them from them. If you can keep being a repeat customer, you're going to get animals cheaper. If you go somewhere that's, not to knock these breeders because, I mean, they're big time, but if you go to like Stork or Piper or any of them guys, it's going to be tougher because they have so many clients, you're just going to have the money to buy them out themselves. And not all of us do. So don't be afraid to get on like Show Goats and go down to that Oklahoma Breeders page and go check out them guys. Build that relationship, especially if it's a 2 or 3 hour drive, that's pretty easy. Sometimes you can catch 2 or 3 of them in that trip and make it worth your while. Goat housing, and I'm just going to have more pictures than I am just wording. We've all been there. We've all had this kind of set up for a pen. That is not ideal at all. But if that's what you're working with, that's what you're working with. I tell my people they need to be out of the weather when they want to be, and they need to be dry. Now, if we're talking about weathers, if you can make it an insulated heated barn, which my competitive weather families, theirs are insulated. They got propane heaters. I mean, and them goats will be wearing 3 or 4 jackets. and it's a totally different deal. Probably a little more excessive than what a lot of us are going to be dealing with every day. The barn on the bottom, it's just a picture that I found offline because my barn's dirty and I didn't want to go over to this other parent's house that's a little ways from me. This is pretty close to ideal. Then pins are probably a little wide, but if you can make them into runs that are about 4 foot wide, those look closer to about 6. Hanging feeders. Don't use them feeders that can be down on the ground. They'll crap in them, they'll lay in them. Buckets, we use the 2.5 gallon waters, clip them up in the corners. And then also the good thing is, like right now in the summertime, like on sheep, the goats probably not as much, that sheep will drink all that bucket in a day. So if my kids don't water when I go out there, or if I go out there at night to feed or help feed, and they're empty, I know my boys didn't do the chores like they should have in the morning. Does that make sense? So that 2.5 gallon bucket is a really good indicator if things are getting taken care of. If you put the big giant buckets in there, they can get the green algae in them, different things like that, where the little buckets are easy to clean and take care of it. I don't do any of that where you put blocks and things like that for them to get up on. Goats are definitely a creature that if you teach them the bad habits, I mean, they're just like a dog. If you let a dog pee in the house and do that with whatever he wants, that's what a goat will do. He'll learn bad habits very easily. So when you feed, things like that, which we'll talk about more, you got to make good habits for these creatures.
On the screenings, if they're on cement, like if it's a cement barn, what do you recommend?
I've had some on cement, and just make sure that they keep that broomed off and cleaned up.
What do you recommend to put down? Would you say like pellets?
Yeah, especially in the summertime, I like the pellets because you can wet them down, let it be a wet, sandy type, and those work really well. We've had them on cedar fiber before. Cedar fiber, sometimes it stains up, sometimes it don't. It's kind of just one of those hit or misses. Have you had much experience on that?
I don't love cedar fiber just because of its ability to stain.
You don't
Yeah.
have any problem with the pellets staining hay? That's the only thing we worried about. Some
Yeah.
of those ones that are a little more yellow, that's the only thing I worried about.
I think if you just make sure to keep them clean and keep them picked up. Also, talking about bedding, do not let them put hay or anything down. That encourages mites. And I don't know, it seemed like the conditions were just right this last year, about a week or two before OIE. I know we had one of our crappy does break out with it and lost some hair. One of my parents with some pretty nice goats, he had a little bit break out, which he got it cleaned up and got it fixed. But mites are something that's really easily to have in your barn, especially if you're putting down old hay, and it's not really that good at bedding. So don't ever use hay for the bedding. If you can get away with it, or don't let them do that, because that right there is going to stay muddy. It's going to stay wet. They're going to stay cool. You got to have them up in a place that's going to stay dry. That's probably the biggest thing with goats, is they got to be in a dry place. If they're not, then you're just asking for all kinds of problems. Another thing on that bedding, like if you do the shavings or the cedar fiber, for me, I've noticed if you put it in there super thick, you're going to cause hoof problems where their toes are going to grow real funky, and then that's another problem on itself on trimming hooves.
So I've never used the pellets, but if you did that and you wet them down, how often do you change that? Like how often?
You probably need to about every 2 weeks. I mean, just depends on how many you have in there. Like I can tell you right now, and this is my other family that hits it really hard. We have 6 goats in a pen together right now. We're just learning how to eat. We're learning to not be shy at the feeder and be aggressive. And that's what he's doing at his house. We're just trying to keep the coxie out of them and keep them from having the runs. And we're just growing them right now. So if it was me, that would get pretty dirty pretty quickly. Now, if you had one goat in a run pen like that, it's going to take a while for that to get nasty. The feeds that are used out there, and there you could probably add another 5 or 10 to this very easily. Pretty much, if you want to be a part of the Who's Who group, the Show Ride Advance or Advancer Plus is definitely stuff to be on. Has anybody priced it this year?
Yeah, $35.
I can get it for $32.
We're
Our fat size is
32,
37.
35, 36. We've had, because of that, we're switching. I'm learning to feed Mormons more and more.
That's what I'm doing.
Forever I was the pink bag guy, and I couldn't. I don't make any money from them, and I couldn't fend off these families that were like we have 6 on feed, it keeps going up, there's palatability issues, and finally after 15 years of that, I was like, okay, let's explore this other deal. There's
Yep.
some outfits that feed it exclusively that have been very, very successful.
So and I heard somebody say the fat and sassy or the Delicious and all that. I don't feed any of that. It gets them too soft, and it seems like them families that might have a nice one when it's at Tulsa, and if they're not very good feeders and they're feeding that stuff, they're going to be sloppy jawed and fat and nasty by Christmas. I mean,
That's what we feed our bucks.
Yeah.
That's what they have us have our bucks on.
So, and you know, purebred deal is different than the junior deal, and I don't know what your operation is,
No,
but
it's true.
but the Advancer Plus, if you can afford it, or if you have a kid only feeding 1 or 2, I would try to put them on that, because a bag and a half, 2 bags a month is what you're going to go through. We're feeding 7 right now, and it could grow. We've started with the more grands on the Mormon. I'm getting it for 22 or 23. With my does, and I've been doing this now for 4 or 5 years, I feed half and half with sheep feed. I was with Nuco on the show right, too expensive again, and we've been on Charmison now. This will be the 2nd or 3rd year that we've done the Charmison, and I've really liked it. And but I will say this: don't just feed straight sheep feed, because I believe that they get copper deficient, and you will start seeing like split tails. And does that make sense? What I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
And they just get a deficiency. Their hair, they look wormy at times. And then I put them right back on straight show right, and it cleaned up. So I've just started splitting my show goat feed and my sheep feed, and I do that for my does. I wouldn't do that for a wether. If I was going to feed a wether and he's worth any kind of money, I'd be on the Advancer. I wouldn't even. Or if you just want to learn how to feed the Mormons, get after it. That's what I'm going to do. Obviously, you're going to do that this year. And they have the pelleted, and then they have the more grands. I think that's 2 different things, isn't it?
Yeah, the starter or whatever it's.
Cell prep.
Yeah, cell prep. We're blending that in more grand.
Yeah. So more or less, and I know for most of you guys, you're probably not feeding this personally. This is for students. For me, I'm experimenting at home, and I'm able to communicate with my families, and we'll figure it out. But this feed deal is nuts. And then I think Purina has brought back the old Intimidator mix. You probably remember that name. That used to be the feed. I'm afraid to go try it now because.
Commotion goat?
Huh?
Is it like kind of like the commotion goat?
Intimidator used to be the honor feed for show goats back like 2007, 2008, whatever. Then they lost the rights to it or whatever. Then they changed the rations and it went out the window. Then Show Right has really pushed and got ahead of everybody. So you could even check out the Purina version. I will say gut health is huge. You got to keep these things eating. Goats were made to do what? Pick briars, pick leaves. That small mouth, it's not like the steer where they're a steam shovel. They're in there like a pair of pliers picking little bitty leaves and stuff. So their gut, you have to teach them to eat. Gut candy, it's expensive. It's like $10 a pound. So if you buy that 10-pound bucket, it's $100. I forgot what the name of the other, it's an Amifirm or something like that product. I can't remember. Cattle guys use a lot of it. But you can feed that. It's a gut health stuff. You can buy about a 50-pound bag for about $20. I can't tell you which way is better. We've done it both ways, and I seem to have better luck with not having upset stomachs and things like that with the gut candy. Gold Dust, you better be using this stuff, especially when you're talking about getting a weather ready, or if you're getting one that's maybe green. They have a recipe out there also called chocolate milk that is Gold Dust, and it's mixed with some other things, Texas tea, and it'll really bloom one up really quickly if you're behind. But the Gold Dust will help get them tops firmed up and get them hardened up. Now there's some other tricks and things like that, but the family that had Reserve Grand at OYE back 4 or 5 years ago, and they do it even now, they'll start drenching in January, twice a day. That sucks for that kid. I wish I was that good a parent for my kids. I'm not going to go out there and drench a goat. If you've ever drenched a goat, you only want to do it once or twice, and that's it. Now, whenever it gets time, like for 2 weeks out, and if we're really trying to get something ready, we'll get out there and go to drenching. Now, sheep drenching, that's easy, but goat drenching is a pain in the butt. I really feel like this meme picture is definitely how the feed deal feels. Another thing that I didn't put up there a lot, so if we're talking about does and wethers, on my does, I use Melatonin Pills. I put the 10cc or the 20cc pill. I might throw 2 in there a day and just go on. They'll eat it right up. I can't tell you if it helps any.
It does.
It makes me feel better.
It does.
What do you do that for?
Growing hair.
Hair growth.
Yeah.
Use them in that in general.
You know, I wouldn't, there are some that'll do the melatonin implants. Just make sure you have enough on hand to get you through whatever your major show is. Because if you run out 20, 30 days beforehand, they might blow all that hair out and you're really going to be in trouble. So that's why I like the pills better than I do the implants.
Like if you're targeting OIE,
So let me tell you kind of our hair regiment, and this kind of goes into the doe deal I was going to talk about. Right now we're getting them on, we get them to the house, we clip them right then. I want to see what they really look like. Plus it's easier to look at them that way. If I'm going to go out there and feed them every day and they got neck hair that's that long, it sucks to feed them every day. We'll go and clip them out. Throughout the summer, mostly through here in July, if we got 2 or 3 that are really coming on and we know, hey, those are going to be maybe the ones that we're going to start jackpotting here in July, August, into Tulsa, we're going to push them really hard. We're going to wash and dry and work hair probably 2 to 3 times a week. And then whenever we get past that point, we get into like November, December, we'll still work hair maybe once a week. Now after that, we really slowed down. And I've had both experiences now where my brother-in-law, his senior year, we pushed super hard. He actually listened. We worked hair. And it was like we go into OIE and it felt like we had no hair, but we just overworked it. So there is a happy medium there. To me, this is the time to break it, get it trained, get it flowing the right way, and then work it till Tulsa. And you'll tell a big difference between the ones that's been working or not working when you go to Tulsa. Huge difference. And then about 2 weeks before Tulsa is whenever the hair growth for us really kicks in, and we're good all the way through till the spring. But again, I would about December, January, I'd slow up and not go near as hard. Make sure them kids are sheening or putting some kind of product in their hair after they work it. You don't always wash. Sometimes you rinse, you blow it out, you might wash. Normally what we would do is if somebody got an upset stomach and they got a little mess on them, that's when we'll really do a deep wash. If not, we rinse. Or if it's nasty cold, like in Oklahoma, the weather in the wintertime is probably pretty good except for like 2 weeks in the whole winter. During that 2 weeks, if we feel like we need to get them up, we'll just get them up, we'll sheen them, blow them out, kick them back out. A little bit of work goes a long ways compared to just letting them stay dirty in that pen. Plus, it seems like they want to start sloughing a little hair here and there about January, February. If you can kind of keep that pulled out, maybe you keep some little bit of growth as you go. Some of them have the hair, some of them don't have the hair. That's just part of the game. So does versus wethers. The little meme up there, goat jocks be like, oh yeah, we have a little fake hair in there. And you don't need to be doing all that stuff. It's one of those things, the guys that can do it good, you don't know that they're doing it. And the ones that are making them look elephant-legged, like I don't know why them guys are getting into that and then judges are just saying, oh man, that's a stout one. No, he's not a stout one, he's just fixed up. I teach my kids, we're bracing. Everywhere we can go, we're bracing. Now I know like Southwest District or Northwest District or wherever, you probably can't brace at them shows. But if you're in the Southeast, if you're at a regional show or any of those, you better be bracing or you're going to get your teeth kicked in. And at Tulsa and OIE, again, I'm glad nobody from Tulsa or OIE is here. If you're not yanking back on chains, you're going to get your crack kicked. I mean, it's just the game. And I hate that. I hate that we are not allowing kids to brace them, but we're making such a big emphasis on handling. Makes no sense to me. So working hair, clipping. If you want to learn how to clip, the only way to learn to clip is by doing it. You can't just go and watch somebody and just say, oh, I'll do it next time. You got to get in there. You got to do it a lot. And I figured it up one time, just kind of playing around. You know, our goats there at the house. I used to be really bad about, so when I was at Colgate, man, we got a show this weekend, we clip. Oh, we got a show next week, I refresh, clip everything. Now I'm to the point, if I clip something this week, I might not reclip them for 3 weeks. I'll let their neck hair grow out a little longer. I might clean up just the back side of their neck and the point of their shoulder there, and that's about it. I might just knock some hair off their flank or whatever if I need to, but we don't. We clip about every 3 or 4 weeks if we're really in a hard show schedule. You can't go every weekend. So on the weathers, my opinion, if you're planning on going to an important show, you better be staying home for 3 or 4 weeks beforehand. And now that fungus is so bad, I don't know about you guys, it seems like fungus is mutated, and now it's like staph is how it wants to be. And if you ever get it like that, you're at home. That animal's probably not going nowhere for at least 6 weeks. And if you ever get their skin right, and that's a big deal. We had a South down at Tulsa that got kicked to the crosses, and he still made the sale. He came back, and that was the year that they didn't kill him. When I thought, man, we got something here, and we were going to go to Louisville with him, and he broke out with fungus. I've never had it this bad, and it took him 6 weeks to get over it, and it was just oozing, and we just couldn't get him over it.
The kids can get it too from it.
Oh yeah. Oh, my kids, myself, I might have a spot on me. I never had it on my face, but I can only imagine. But getting in there and learning to clip and rinsing, you'll want to write this down. If you are breaking hair, when I say breaking hair, like for the first time, or if you got one that's kind of wild-haired, you want to take one of them 2.5-gallon buckets. You want to take conditioner and put like 3 or 4 big squirts into that bucket. You want to take a bottle of vinegar and do 3 or 4 gulps into that bucket, and then fill that bucket up with water, stir it up a little, and pour it down the back of that doe. And you can do this to probably wether's legs. We've done it to sheep legs before to help soften that wool. But take that, so they're already wet. You take that, pour it on them, comb it in, and then blow it out. Don't rinse it out. And it'll take a little longer, but man, you want to talk about something that treats your hides and get your hides hydrated, but also it really breaks your hair and gets your hair to lay back or set however you want to. And that's something that we'll do probably every 2 or 3 weeks. We do that.
You said conditioner, and then what else was that?
So conditioner, do 2 or 3 big squeezes out of it, and then 2 or 3 globs of, and I don't know if that's a proper terminology, whatever, out of a vinegar into that bucket, and then just fill the rest of it up with water, pour it down their back.
The white distilled for the white vinegar?
Yeah. CL, he was asking us about what we did, and I told him that, and I told him that was a Simmental trick my wife would use, and now he calls it the Walden Wonder Wash, and I don't...
Helps with baby hair, too.
What? Yes. Yeah, we've had some that's there. You know, you just get that kink in there. It's like Hereford hair, and it'll help break it, and it'll go on thick. Like you're pulling it through, and you're seeing this heavy conditioner. Like you can see it combing out, but it'll really help set your hair, blow it out, and then the next day I would rinse them, and it'll all come out. Now, if you've been out at a show and your hair looks beat up, and maybe they've been out 2 or 3 shows, 2 or 3 weekends, we do that wash and leave it in. And man, you want to talk about let's just say you show at Tulsa on that Friday. We'll do this at home probably on Tuesday, and then we will show up to Tulsa Thursday night before the show. We'll go through and rinse everything, wash them, and then we'll wash them again. But you could tell a big difference of hair after you've done that wash.
So when would you do that, like first time, like if we just bought goats this month?
Whenever you want to. Whenever you feel like it's time to start working hair, do it to your does. If you're going to do it to wethers, just take their leg and just stick it down in there, or just put some up on it and you can work leg hair up. But on them does, just pour it down their back. You just do it whenever you feel like their hair needs to be broke or trained, or if they need to be refreshed. It's really good for that. Weather goats. And I seen that picture the other day on Facebook, and I sent that to Cundiff, which is one of my parents, and he's like, man, I already got one built for my daughter. And You know, you see some crazy things, you hear crazy things. I still have parents or kids that'll show up and they'll say, hey, we bought one of them chariots. And I'm like, well, you better unbuy it because we're not using it. I mean, you'll have crazy things like that. And so you're just going to have to talk to them families, explain to them why that's not going to work. If you're really going to be successful in this deal, you buy the muscle. I mean, it's in the genetics. If they don't have it, they're never going to have it. So pulling tires or making them stand up on their fence to eat up off the ground, that was something that I remember doing back whenever I was in high school back in the late 90s, 2000s, and none of that crap works. If anything, it just breaks loins down and things like that. Weather shows, I will say this, so on does and wethers, to me, we get a ton of mileage out of our does. We go a lot. Wethers, if we showed any wethers, and we have in the past, we might go 2 or 3 times and that's it. And there's some, the ones that are doing well, that might be the only time they ever get out to when they go to Hawaii or whenever they go to Tulsa. So if you got a kid that's going to be competitive or trying to make Seltzer County, but they want to go show, you know, weather's a little tougher. They got to have coats on them. You got to keep them warm. Does, we never put a coat on anything. Whenever it was at -10 and all that crap 2 years ago, I just upped my feed. I just upped everything really high and just let them consume all they wanted. And we still came out of that thing just a little bit raw. But with my barn, I wasn't able to shut it down and just heat it even to like 30 or 40. If you can do that, great. Most of your families aren't going to be able to. Just up your feed whenever it's in cold spells. This time of year, super hot, we have fans blowing on them. 1, to keep them cool, but then 2, I really feel like it keeps the flies from pestering them and always being on them. Definitely had them families put in either the fly traps or put down a quick bait or whatever. If you're going to use quick bait, be careful about the quick bait. I mean, it is a poison and it is a very, very tiny pellet. So you don't want to like sprinkle a big glob of it in the pen because they might ingest that. But is there any other questions over maybe does or for me, you got to know what the game is in your county. If you know only 2 does must sell, but the wethers, it's however many show up, well, obviously, if you don't have a good doe or if you can't get a good doe, you better be showing a wether. Now, if it's a percentage and either one of them can make sell or whatever in your county, then play that game of does or wethers. It's just whatever you guys prefer or whatever you feel comfortable with. There's advantages and disadvantages. If you're going to show does, you better have your hair broke and you better be able to clip it. If you're going to do wethers, you better not go too much. And there's some families that'll go all the time. I've seen, especially on the sheep side, there's some families that'll go just as many times with their sheep. The bronze medallion wether of walks, the white-faced cross that was bronze, that sheep, I bet he went to 25 shows that year. He stayed slicked off the entire year. So it can be done. It just takes a lot of management. It takes some skill to keep them animals together. Clipping blades. If you're going to show does, my first suggestion is make sure you know how to clip a wether off and you can get it smooth. If you can't get a wether smooth with a set of cover coats, your chances of getting a doe clipped out are probably not very high. My brother-in-law wants to clip goats so bad he can't even see straight, but he can't even run a set of cover coats to get a wether clipped off. Like he'll leave lines in them. He just doesn't have that fine detail type attitude about it. If you're going to start clipping off goats and you've never done it or you're going through clipping does, I would start out with a medium blade. With a medium blade, it's very forgiving. You can back drag. You can do different things with it. The blade is really backed off so you can't even cut yourself. And there'll become a point whenever you're clipping that you're going to be like, this is taking way too long. This sucks. And then you'll move to the super blocking. And then you'll say, oh my God, I'm taking off huge chunks. It's very easy to do. At my house, we don't even use the cover coats on the necks anymore. We've gone, and again, before you take this suggestion, know what kind of goat you have. We're using like 10s and 20 blades on their necks, and we're blending them things down tight, and we can get them sculpted in. But that's kind of high precision. If you're using this cover coat, it's going to leave a little more hair, and it's going to be a little easier to blend that back into that shoulder with that medium blade. Then get into the super block. And has anybody here clipped does before? Do y'all use guards?
For the neck,
Use
and
guards.
up underneath the front end, usually a 9 with like a 8th guard on it. Usually
Yeah,
for the
well,
neck. That was just the way I was.
No, I understand.
taught to.
Like when I was at Balco, I'd watch him clip. I'd watch Nathan Torrance clip. I'm trying to think who else was out there at that time that was pretty decent at it. I mean, but then as I moved down to Colgate, it was more or less just got to learn on my own. And I'll tell you that super blocking, I took that and pretty much did everything but the skin in their neck, did everything with it. And you want to talk about learning quick? Oh, you'll mess up, but you'll learn quickly too. And like I said, you might mess up on one goat. You don't say anything to that family, and you just know this next one, I'm going to clip him a little differently. Is there any questions over any of this that we've covered so far? I mean, before we talk about medicines and things like that?
On your weathers, so some people say to put them like down shorter, like with a guard or with a longer, like other than a cover coat, until you get like district or city. Is that like your opinion?
Oh,
too,
yeah.
Or
We don't quite dough clip them.
Yeah.
We'll take a blade, and I forgot what that blade is just offhand. It's almost like a quarter of an inch. I mean, it's a big blade. And yeah, we'll clip them down, and then we'll take that cover coat, or we'll take them other blades, and then we'll kind of put the lines in them and kind of dough clip them like that. You're going to get a lot more mileage out of that. Some judges will say, man, that one's a lot thicker. In reality, it's hair. So it'll help you, yes, and it's protecting you from fungus. If you can leave hair when possible, leave hair. Another thing that we didn't talk about, we have started using this a lot at my house, and I will say goats are, you could have a goat that leads and acts perfect, and they can act like a knucklehead the next day and won't lead for 2 weeks. You buy one of them cable halters,
the ghost
you take a whole lot of attitude out of any of them. Now, the first time they're going to throw a fit, and we can't buy them small enough. Like, we have to loop them back through themselves once, and so you have to be careful. It'll cinch down on their face pretty tight. But a day or two of dragging one around, and you don't even drag them. They say, "Oh, I'm gonna come on with you," but their old heads will get sore, and they'll eventually let go and just follow you with you. We've even started showing them a little bit. It's a little hard for them kids to keep them heads back, like at OIE and things like that. But if we're bracing, then it's no big deal.
I was going to ask, do you use a halter and a chain like on racing and that kind of stuff?
We
That's
have.
what we do, because the weathers, they trot better and that kind of stuff on like a loose halter.
Yeah.
And then you can brace with a chain, you're not stuck in their head back.
Honestly, practice with whatever you're going to do at home. Don't show up to the day of the show and think, we're going to use this cable halter today. You're going to have a train wreck. Practice at home, get the equipment you need. Don't buy, there's the old, it's not even old school, it's probably the last 5 or 10 years. It looks like a halter, yeah, and it's got the nozzle up on the nose, and I don't care for them. We've bought one and we've practiced around the house, and I just didn't like the way it did things. So the cable halter, and they're like $20, you can buy them online. If you're not using that, then use the regular chained halter. Don't ever buy a rope halter for a goat. To me, that's a waste of time. It's really hard to get them broke to that. So to meds, and this is kind of your daily, or not your daily, your monthly stuff that you could use. Now, we don't use Baytril monthly, but Baytril's pretty good for, if you got the coughs or anything like that, or coccidiosis. A lot of guys are using this as their first start off point of trying to get rid of the gut rot or whatever they got. And then you can move to, we also use a lot of, what's the expensive medicine the vet will give you?
New floor drugs.
No,
Exceed.
no. I'll think of it here in a minute.
That's like the 3 most expensive.
But we use that also if we have to get rid of coccidiosis.
Exhale.
No, I'll think of it here in a minute. Wormers, that's the 3 that I'll use a lot of. If you see the little white tapeworms in your waist, you need to use Safeguard. It'll go get that tapeworm. Ivomec, we use it more or less to keep mites off of them. We really use it in our sheep to keep them from picking their legs. And so we use the Ivomec, Valbazin or Valbazin, however you want to say it. You need to give that 3 days in a row. That's fairly good stuff. The only bad thing is if you're telling students to do this, you're trusting them to give it 3 days in a row. And then the Thymine, I haven't had as many, well, I say that now. I mean, when we were raising them, we did. Thymine, if you have any goats that come out puny or they get sick, wormy, whatever, and if you're going to hit them with a heavy dose of wormer, I'd probably hit them with Thymine really hard too, probably cc and a half. If you're ever nervous about it, just squirt it down their throat. Take the needle off. But you can squirt large doses of medicine down their throat, and with that, it's going to take a whole lot to overdose them, if that makes sense. So Thymine will keep you from getting. Have any of you ever seen the polio or anything like that in sheep or goats? Stargazing.
That's what we had. We had one that was stargazing.
Yeah, they look like they're drunk if they're standing up, or if most of the time they're laying down and they're just looking at the sky and they're just kind of, their heads are just everywhere. And that is Thymine Deficiency, and if they're that far gone,
You gotta get to them fast.
yeah, you better get them to a vet because he'll mainline them or whatever he needs to do. So Thymine, just get them families. You can probably get about any vet to give you this or buy it from them, and you can give it to all your animals, and it'll ensure health on those goats. It's one of those we've even had back whenever we were raising goats. We had a doe out in the pasture that she looked healthy, and we go out there and she's laid out on the ground stargazing, and we lose her, but I didn't even realize that she was Thymine deficient, and you won't know. So just get that into a habit of using. We also use a lot of B12. Just squirt it down the throat. I don't even put a needle on that. B12, or I think it's called B10, maybe something like that too. Does anybody have any questions?
So as far as this list, like what's your monthly, what would you do for a show go monthly if you did?
Oh, I'm going to worm, and there's 2 different schools of thought on wormers. Old school used to be you got to rotate your wormers, and then now I'm kind of hearing back and forth, and then now it started to sound like you get a one wormer and just use it until you don't think it works anymore, then you switch to another one. But now I'm hearing going back to rotating again. I don't think that nobody really knows. I'm going to say if you talk to 3 or 4 vets, they'd all tell you a little bit different. And I think we've caused that on our own because all these worms are kind of a super worm now. And you better have several things on hand to use. One of my vets there at Allen, we were talking about it one day, and he said you might as well just give them all 3 wormers at the same time. And at least you're getting everything, and at least you're treating for it all. So the Thymine I would give once a month, B12 once a month, or whenever you think that they're not doing as well, maybe not as thrifty, maybe not eating as well. That's something else we didn't talk about. So when you feed, start out with small amounts and work your way up. Nothing worse than having goats leave feed in the pans. If they're leaving feed in the pan, you're teaching them bad habits to not eat. Goats are like I said earlier, they're a creature of habit. And if you keep just pouring feed on top of it and they get a buffet all day, they're never going to be a good eater. So if you have to back them down to 1/4 pound and starve them out for a little bit, they're going to learn to eat. Or put a buddy in there that's maybe a little more aggressive and give them half that feeding. That other one's going to learn to eat, or he's not going to do very well. Because I can promise you there's nothing worse than an animal on feed that doesn't eat and is not performing. But the biggest things I would probably say, find a breeder, build a relationship with them, because that's the only way you're going to be able to get any kind of steals or good deals. Does that make sense? For your kids that are FFA kids, and or for your own personal kids. I mean, you gotta stick with people. If you don't, and you go back and forth, and they see you every 2 or 3 years, you're not building that relationship. So.
Do you guys ever do insurance on any of your livestock?
We should. I think from what I've heard, from my insurance guy, I think it's $100 per thousand is what, and all of them are different. Some of them have no vet, like if they mortality, if they die, they don't have to go to the vet for an autopsy or whatever. There's some of them that you do. I mean, it just depends on whoever you have your provider with. I think you can get it like through Farm Bureau, I think has something. I don't know about like AFR or any of those.
Ours is through Prairie States.
So.
Oklahoma City. What's your honest opinion on exercise regimen? Treadmill, running, jumping? What's your honest opinion?
The girl that had the Reserve Grand Weather, that they have a treadmill sitting at their house. I see more junk sitting in their treadmill than it getting used. And we have a treadmill in my house now. We don't treadmill the sheep, or not the sheep, the goats very often, or none, actually none. Now I will say this, we'll walk them and then we run them back to our barn. But sheep, you got a treadmill, which Golden will talk about that kind of stuff. But exercising, everybody's kind of got different opinions about it. You can, hit them with protein. We didn't even talk about additives, like true additives. And there's so many out there. That's one of them things. Find somebody that you're comfortable with. I don't mind ever answering a phone call if you guys have questions. I know for me, like with Torrance, whenever he was clipping when I was a young ag teacher, I might go sit there for 5 or 10 minutes and just kind of watch him. Just learn. And then now, even as a guy that's been clipping 16 years now, if you see somebody doing a good job, you might pause and just kind of see what they're doing, see what they're using. You're always going to learn something new. There's always new little tricks to do on these goats. And we just, like the does, we just clip them like a heifer. We just wedge them up, slick off their chest floors down to their navel. Do not clip the belly hair from their navel back. You might put a line in it, and you might cut a flank in it, but I mean, there's some people that will go in and clip that down, and you just introvert them. You just made them deeper in their chest floor than you did their flank, and that is big. Trim hooves. You got to trim hooves monthly, if not every 6 weeks. And how I do it, I have a 4.5-inch grinder. I went and found it's a hard paddle that fits on it, and then it's got like a wood grinding disc that I can buy and put on there. And I trim all my hooves like that, which whenever you got 10 or so to do at a time, there's no sitting there with the hand shears. I don't do the hand shears unless there's like a toe that's just funky and I need to get in there deep. But I will tell you, like I have scars all over my hands. It will eat your hands up. And I mean, it's a bad tool, but I mean, you can get a goat, you can trim hooves in 2 minutes, 1 minute. I mean, it's easy. And if they're really bad, another thing that I see people make big time mistakes. Quit clipping the heel of them goats. Take toe. When in doubt, take toe. Leave their heels. Because what you're doing is if you're taking that heel, you're just making that pastern, you're just putting all that stress back there and you're breaking them pasterns down. And front pasterns too. Keep the toes trimmed, so if you're ever in doubt, clip that toe down to where they're down to their quick or where they're bleeding, and then leave that heel, and then you can build up a heel, and you can always take a little off the heel. But if you ever clip a bunch off a heel, it's going to take you a long time to ever get that right, and you might wreck that goat where his pasture might not ever be right. BOSE is another thing you need to have. That's something else. BO, capital S-E, it's a selenium. We'll do that once a month. BOSE. It's a selenium. It's just selenium.
Dr. Plague, a firm believer in selenium.
Yeah, on all those vitamins and stuff, just probably a CC of that.
BOSE, I'd probably do half. Yeah, I mean, there's probably been times where I've been mad and I've given an in or a CC. I mean,
Sounds like we've had a little goat that was born, his legs, were a little wonky. We've given it BOSE and.
yeah, if their knees are a little swollen or bucked over, BOSE will typically help. Now, I'm not saying it's a miracle cure. I mean, if they're crazy, but if you just got some swollen up places here and there, BOSE will help take that down. We're pushing these goats past what they were made to do. You're going to have them where you buy them and they're good-legged. And at some point, like between now and like August, you're pushing them so hard, they're going to get a little looser about their pasterns, or they're going to be a little wonky legged sometimes. I mean, just because their joints and all that are trying to catch up. So if we can keep Bosie in them, if you can start them does on fat, it's sooner the better. Try it, because if you can get out ahead of them, you can always keep them managed. If they just keep growing on you and they'll never put any body on or never get fat, you're always going to get thumped on, just because you're not going to have the body or the mass to go with that. I know we covered a ton of information and kind of was everywhere. I mean, we could talk about clipping for 3 or 4 hours if we had a goat here and we're clipping out a goat.
What are you using for coccidiosis, treatment of that?
Well, so Baytril, and
Is it Corid?
well, no, I've used Corid.
I have good luck with the cord.
Corid, I'm going to tell you, so think about like the gut being a war zone. You're taking Corid, and that's like dropping a nuclear bomb in there. You got your good bacteria and you got your bad bacteria in there, and you just bombed it all. So you are going to have to go back in there definitely with like a gut candy or Probias, any of those. And there's even another one that they sell at Atwood's. Like Probias has like 1 million live bacteria. There's another one at Atwood's they sell that has like 1 billion. Like you can read it on the label. And I bought it a couple of times thinking, billion's got to be better than 1 million.
Is that the Jumpstart?
Yeah, something like that.
That button over there will pull it up.
If you ever get really bad on that, you can go to a kill plant and they'll give you the
I had
sounds gross, but
I had a family that
if you're in an emergency where that goes,
it's called like a rumen transformation or something like that.
It's funny though, because like you say that about cord, and then some other people are like, you bring them home, they need this much Thymine, this much of the Bosie, and they say give them so much cord for 3 days in a row. You know, some people tell you that, like.
If you don't overdo it with the Corid, you're probably okay. But I know for me, when it comes to
Yeah.
Coxy, I want it done, so I'm going to bomb it hard.
Yeah, and then rebuild.
But I
Marquee still using the
Marquee.
Yeah, it's Tontaril and Tontaril, or however you say the T word, are the two that get kind of bounced back and forth. Marquee is a name brand.
Yeah, and we use the Tolterzil too, the white stuff. But Marquee we use a lot of too. And that deal is like $8 or $10 for like a diabetic syringe of just 2 cc's. And I think we're supposed to be giving one and then give one later. I don't. I just give the whole thing at one time and go on. And I might buy an extra one and give it the next day or something. Like the coccidiosis, it don't go away. You have to treat it. If you don't treat it and you get them to the water, just water, and there's blood, like you're in bad shape. I've had one family that we got the goat home. The goat was a little sickly when we got it, but that was the only way we could afford it. I said, this goat gets worse, you need to call me. 7 days later, they called me, and I went out there and said, oh, how long has this been going on? Oh, 7 days. Goat died next day, and it was my fault. So I learned from that point on, I'm not going to take any more risks like that with newbie families, even though it's cheaper on them. But so just always CYA, because parents are not CYAing for you. You got to cover yourself, that's for sure.
One more, like school farm city when they've had coccidiosis, what do you treat your ground with?
I don't think it's so much in the, well, I mean, it's going to be in the waste that's on the ground.
Pick it up and go.
I mean, I guess you could bleach it, but your biggest thing, you got to kill your flies, so you got to get fly control. And honestly, to me in my barn, once we get some gut scours going on, it's going to go through the whole barn. I mean, it's just part of it. It's kind of like getting the mouth sore mouth. If I'm going to get it, I'd rather get it now and get it over with, which it went through my barn. It's the first time we've had it in like 3 or 4 years. And none of it was bad. I've seen it so bad some years that, I mean, it's like all in their crotch, and I mean, it's everywhere.
Our old man goat vet, he told us to drench with Cydectin also, like Poron. He has us use it, and like our mamas that are still milking, he'll have us give 5 cc's of that, and then when the babies, when we band or whatever, we'll give a cc.
I use a lot of Cydectin
We use
purple,
a lot of purple
like
Cydectin.
7 or 8 cc's down the throat.
And if that don't work, then we go to Valvazone.
Yep. So there's all kinds of, I mean, that's just,
And most people be like, nope, you don't do that, that's not what it's for.
and then the guy down at, Ayers down at Marietta, he gets stuff in from New Zealand that's not even FDA approved, but he's figured out on the shipping side that if you order it in certain size bottles, it doesn't get stopped and checked out. If you try to, which all of us in here would be like, well, if I buy the big bottle, I get to have it for a longer period of time and I get more. He's figured out if you buy the little bottle, they don't stop you and check you, and so he's able to get it in. So again, if you're new or if you're just getting started, if you ever have any questions, call goat guys in your area. And like in our area, Sparks over at Hartshorn or Ricky Jack, myself, whatever. I mean, there's plenty of them. Yeah.
That one.
I learned something
Hammer
here in the
Torch.
last year or so that, and I mean, it kind of aged me a little bit. I've been around, but like, I learned hard about gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria, and I was not treating. So everybody talks about this fast-acting pneumonia. Well, the fast-acting pneumonia got us. A lot of times, I think that happens because you get a gram-positive and you treat it with an antibiotic that's a negative. And I had to kind of learn that the hard way because we had a pretty high dollar weather dye, and all we could do is chalk it up to quick pneumonia got us. And so that's something that I have recently learned. And just do your research. Every antibiotic that you have in your medicine box, it'll tell you, like you can figure out if it's a positive or a negative. And
See, I'm gonna have to research all that. I mean,
well, like some of them like Lincomate, some of them that you probably have around for pigs or something else. I mean,
see, no pigs. I don't.
Well, just kind of educate yourself.
Yeah.
And then you just treat them with both. Because they're not going to tell you what they have. You just treat them with both. And like if you give Baytril takes about 12 hours. It's a longer lasting, but it takes a while to become active. So sometimes if I give a Draxxin or a Baytril or something that is a really good, it's not going to give you a lot in the next 2 hours. So I'll get them with some seed or some XNL or something else too that goes to work right away.
I guess I'm unlucky, but I'm lucky. Like my vet is very particular, and he'll say, "Oh, that's off-label on goats," and he don't like to really give me a whole, like it's hard for me to get Baytril. Like a lot of times, like I say, "Oh yeah, I got a sick pig," and then he'll give me Baytril. Like that's how tough he is. So I don't deal with a whole lot of that other stuff. And I mean, I've heard of other guys using it. I just never have myself.
Banamine and dexamethasone.
You know, on Banamine, just if I get one that's sick, or I mean, and even lame. I mean, I've never had to use. I will say this again. I hate drenching goats. I have drenched one and got so aggravated that I guess I poked him too deep down in his throat, and like the next day his throat was huge, and I was walking around Tulsa like, "Hey, anybody got any Banamine?" And it got it down in like 2 hours. I mean, it was still a little swollen, but I mean, it's good to have it on hand. You just never know.
Are you asking to use it or how we use it?
Yeah, I was just curious.
And then the Dex, I mean, again, that's just lung type steroid stuff. I mean, again, for a cough, yeah. I don't use a whole lot of Dex. I have it,
That's
but
like, you were talking about your vet, that's like new for, not very many of them were like, oh yeah, it's goat approved.
now, and then pink eye, I got a sheep at the house that I'm pretty sure he's got pink eye. Yesterday or 2 days ago, we noticed his eye was bluing over. I was like, what the crap? And then the next day, it was like all wet all around his face. I'm like, okay, so at least I know it's probably pink eye. So I just took LA200, again, with the needle off, and just squirted in his eye, and we'll see today how it looks. So
We use that and then the Metricin pink eye spray, we like it.
if you find a good vet that'll work with you, and that's all you guys, work with that guy. Use them and absorb that knowledge. Now, if you got something that's severe, like kidney stones or anything like that, you better find a good vet. I use Pitts here in Stillwater. There's somebody at Newcastle, isn't there? That's who John uses, I think.
Do you recommend
Yeah.
Maybe that's who it is.
The older marker is semi-retired, and he was with us, the younger guys, younger marker does a great job.
But the goat deal, if you better get a good vet if you're going to have stones in any of that stuff, because that's the only way to get
do you
over that.
recommend like the apple cider vinegar or just feeding the feed that has ammonium chloride in it or like?
You know what's funny? I've had